the things it begins, that these little quiet moments that
Yeah.
there's a notion of the sort of ripple, the sort of theme that we like to have for the European Land Art Festival, which is ripples of kindness. And you invite people into that moment to make something, to, you're being kind, you're nurturing of people. And I love the notion that ripples outwards. We don't know that the consequence of our actions, whether they're good or bad, they ripple onwards in ways we can't imagine. And I love to see that.
Lovely to meet you here on Zoom.
Yes, likewise, likewise.
So you are based in the UK.
That's right, in Scotland.
Oh, in Scotland. And it's there that you do these wonderful creations in nature.
Well, it's there, and well, wherever I am, I've traveled with my photography work. Remember I was on as a photographer, I was shooting in England on a project, and I just had an extra half day, so I disappeared into some forest near London, and I made something there. So wherever I am, so it's great because you don't need much. You just need that sort of open space, that freedom, and most important, the time.
Yeah.
And the inclination is always there. So yeah.
Amazing. But so photography was first, and then the nature, the art.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a 30-year career in commercial photography, so I'm always that's still very much the sort of primary of what I'm doing. Certainly at the moment, it's quite a bit of sort of crossover, and I use all my photography skills in what I'm doing in the sort of land art side of it, and I really like that sort of crossover. But things feel like they're shifting a bit in that I'm just getting so much more out of the land art. It's such a joy, but I've also got bills to pay, so
yeah.
and that's so you've got to sort of strike a balance there. But I don't know, it's so become a new passion, or new, but it's been years now, but that I'm really looking to and kind of have the intention to shift things and maybe just share any sort of double career to keep going with my photography. I think I'd need to be doing that, but increasingly doing more workshops and setting up things so I can be selling prints, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that's what friends of mine in the sort of land art side of things, that's what they all tend to do. So
yeah, because photography also changed in the past years now.
Oh yeah, everything's always, that's the one thing that's the only thing that's guaranteed in your life is change. Everything is going to change and whatever's going on. So yeah, there's always change, and photography is changing as it always has been. I mean, sometimes those changes have been at my advantage. When I got into, when I started in photography, everything was on film. It was a very small sort of world of people who actually, had trained to do these skills. You really needed certain skills to be able to begin to do that because you can't see the images until you've processed these images. So you had to know what you're doing. And now that's massively changed with when digital came along. But in actual fact, it worked to my advantage. I, had all my training, and then digital came along. When I picked that up, I realized it's just another tool. And my career flourished at that time because I found that I really took to what you could do, and the more experimental nature of how much more you can test things and create different looks and feels with digitally. But now, of course, that's on the change again, with the advent of AI coming in, and it's sort of affecting everybody's jobs almost. It's the one thing I do like about land art. I don't, much as people will be are creating fake land art via AI. But if you're teaching a workshop or something like this, we haven't yet got robots that are going to be doing
exactly. Yeah.
Given time, even that may well happen. I know, but I think I'm going to say not in my lifetime, but it's daft to
Okay.
say any of that because stuff is changing faster than we can even
Mm.
imagine at the moment. But yeah, the human connection of working on those projects is fun.
But
That's an important part, and that's it's photography I enjoy, but it's the I know there's sort of constant change, but it's the human aspect, that thing that you can't sort of digitize those parts of it.
yeah.
That are the important parts, and that's what we're in a sort of desperate need of in this day and age. And that it's another reason I want to be doing work, focusing more in that direction. There's such a um, there's such a um, lack of good mental health these days because of the nature of our
Exactly.
lifestyles.
Mm.
And this is something that is been so rewarding for me, and that's what I want to share. That's one of the big reasons behind what I want to focus on.
Mm. But I think it's also not just about the photo or the print or the artwork, but it's actually it must be so rewarding going out there and like looking for these hundreds of leaves that you put on the tree trunk or the rocks that you gather. So it's the process rather than the final project, and it's that what made me think also to talk to you about is that it's this you can see it's a long process that you're going through, but you speed it up, of course, in with that you can do these images on Instagram. But it made me really think about that it's that we have to go back to nature and try these things. That it doesn't have to be this perfect art, but you can just try something.
Yes, it's that's what's really been the big gain for me, especially in this last year. Um, I've been I've had a bit of free time just in the last even this last in autumn. My mother's not been well, so I've been up north in the middle of nowhere, where she's been living, um, helping her. She was in hospital for a while, so each day I was visiting her. But when I wasn't visiting her, I was out in the sort of absolute wilderness out there because it's further north in Scotland, and it was just the best therapy. And like that was it's like being on a retreat. Everyone's saying how stressful it is with my mum not being well, and yes, that is a stressful side, but in actual fact it became a sort of really healing and rich experience because you know I had a place, I had my little wee my time in the forest there, and it's so like because it was day after day of that hospital visit into the woods, and it sort of changed something in me, and just how profoundly I gained a sort of richer sense of self, and I just realizing the impact it's having on my life, and I think whoa, we need this to
Yes,
spread around some more. And of course, I think we all have our own paths and our own gifts and things like this. And I'm like, oh, this is mine. Somebody else, it might be, you know, reenactment battles. I know these people get extremely passionate about whatever it is their thing is, and that's great. But if you have something, or when you find something like that, embracing it and going for it, um, and when I've had the opportunity to be able to share that with people, it's been great. The sort of back and forth with people is great, and I really like the idea of working with people who've had sort of mental health things going on. That people who are in pain, and because it's such a vast percentage of people these days, who are sort of suffering, and you just can't go wrong to go back to nature, like you say, back
exactly.
to the
No.
the basics of it, to get into a forest, to spend time there. We know there's so much more research done in science as well, which is backing all this up. We know it reduces the cortisol in your blood, and increases the positive drugs that we produce. Um, so for me, when I'm in a forest now, my reaction is like it switches on my vision way more than the past. When I walk with somebody else, they're kind of just walking through the forest, and I'm like, whoa, slow down, look at that, you know, and I'm
Yeah.
really seeing things in a different way. That's that's the part that's different, and I tend to find I only get to do that when I'm on my own, because otherwise take a very long time to get anywhere. And I become much more of a intimate conversation. For me, a forest is a busy place, and my sense of that place being alive. You know, I got a very sort of spiritual perspective on life, and that's where when I'm in the forest, that nature, that thought or that connection, that everything has its a sort of form of sentience. You know, that everything is alive. For me, um, the volume of that, it feels like is gets keeps getting turned up. So my sensitivity to it turns up. So, and the sort of the happenstance things that are going on, the synchronicities, the balance of things is so wonderful. And keep having these lovely experiences. Just happen to
Amazing.
meet somebody in the middle of the forest and end up talking to them for like 2 hours or something like this, and
Really
making something at the same
amazing.
time.
Yeah.
You know, and I've met some wonderful people that way, and it's lovely because they all of a sudden they start opening up, because you're not just sort of looking them straight in the eye. You're working on something in the ground, and it's a place when they can start to open up themselves. You're not sort of directly, you know, questioning them or something, or
Yeah.
it's a very gentle and nurturing environment. So there's so many things about that I really enjoy, and that's one of the reasons why I'm one of the directors for the European Land Art Festival, which runs in Dunbar every year in July. So we hold that over the course of around about 6 days, with myself and a couple of other people helping, but the main organizer is James Craig Page, who sort of founded all this, I think back 2017. And that's just growing and becoming very popular. And
Amazing.
it's wonderful to see a beach or a forest full of children, full of families that come
Yes.
in there, and they're all walking past, and they're sort of peering in. What are these strange people doing on the ground? And you know, look over 50 minutes later, and they're all on the ground, and they're all working together, and the kids are laughing, and they're playing, and just to have those moments,
Mhm.
that's what it's about for me.
Well, I think it's also it's something that's not out of reach. You know, it's not art that you think, oh, I would never be able to do that. It's something that anybody can do and create their own patterns and create their own little artwork. You know, so it's not that looking like at a Picasso and thinking, how could I ever do that? So I think that makes it also so approachable.
Yes, yeah, it's sometimes the children don't have an issue with this. I ran a 4 day workshop at the Royal Highland Show in Ingliston in Edinburgh, earlier this year, and the kids, they just rock up and they just get on with it, and they don't have this sort of self-doubt. But as soon as they reach a certain age, or the parents, when you turn to the mum or the dad and you say, right, it's your turn, come on, stack some stones, make some, let's see how you want to make a design on the ground, and they all sort of back away. Oh no, I can't do that. You know, they've got this notion in their head, and you think, oh, your child has not got a problem with this notion, and and it's helping people to release from those notions of judgment, that they've maybe once had some teacher frown at something they drew when they were 9, and
Exactly. Yeah.
they just flicked a switch that went, oh, I don't do art now, I don't do that sort of thing. And of course it's not about that, it's not about the end result, as you say. It's the process, and
Yeah.
that's what's the sort of healing part. And so a funny story, because the most rewarding and richest experience I had of making land art was a day I went the forest, and the leaves were perfect. It was just around early November, maybe in of last year, and the beech leaves were just every color, right from the sort of limey green to these reddish dark browns, and everything in between, of all the shades of lime and yellow. So I'd found and picked a few leaves, and I was making out this spiral, and this little robin kept on coming down and sort of wrecking what I was doing and
Really?
filming the robin and things. And I was having such a great time. I was so in the moment, and every time I turned my back, it'd come back, and the bird had really messed up what I was doing.
Oh,
Because of
sweet.
course, it's
Yeah.
it's going, hey, you've exposed some earth here, and there's going to be
Yeah.
grubs for and goodies for me to eat, and it doesn't care about artwork. And I'm like, great, it's a good lesson on not grasping
Absolutely.
on the end result.
Yeah.
And I got halfway through making that, and I was just grinning from ear to ear. It was such a kind of
Mhm.
joyful state of that, because it's quite a simple process, and I knew what I was wanting to do, and just that quietness and joy in that moment that I get in those moments sometimes. And then it started to get a bit windy, and the whole thing just blew away. Like in this a
Yeah.
couple of seconds, it was almost all gone, and I just burst out laughing and packed up my stuff and left.
Mm.
And that was weirdly the most joyful day of making
Really?
art I had.
Mhm.
And I thought that's great because it was helping me. Because,
Mm.
I'm like everybody else. I have this ego, I'm going like, oh, I want to make this look really good, and I'm a perfectionist, when I make things. I tend to make them quite perfectly, when I'm animating them, I'm making sure I get it right. I will spend as many hours as it takes to do that, because that's the kind of art I like and what I enjoy doing. But I love it when you get those lessons
Mm.
in sort of seeing it's to me, I
Yeah.
like a divine trickster,
Yeah.
like he's coming along and going, ah, "Don't take yourself too seriously, mate."
Exactly. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, uh, um, let it go. You don't take any of the stuff with you.
Mm.
So
And and nature is
enjoyed
not
that day.
perfect. And nature is not perfect either. I mean, all those leaves are not that perfect. That you,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's it.
Uh,
That's it. I
mm,
mean, it's funny. I've seen. Um, I make these very perfect little videos
mm,
online now and put them out. And I think for the first time recently, I filmed something just kind of just much more spontaneously. And I was a bit of a bad day because I had my back was sore. It was pouring with rain. I didn't have much time. And I'm in the forest, I've got to walk the dog regardless. And I'm walking
mm,
through the forest in a pouring rain day. And usually, I'm not going to make something on a day like that. And I passed this tree and I picked up some leaves and I stuck it to the tree. And I thought, oh, the rainwater can stick it on. I'm going to just put a line of leaves down this tree while I'm walking past it. And I did that. And I thought, well, I wonder what another line would look like. And
yeah.
before I knew it, I'd been there like 20 minutes or something like this and covering it. And it was looking really fun and I loved it. And I loved that all of a sudden I wasn't thinking about my sore back and all the other stuff that was
Yeah.
bothering me. So I pulled out my camera and I just made a quick video just going, oh, you know what, I was grumpy today, and I just changed my mind a little bit, and I hadn't planned this, and it's really nice not planning it. I made a few comments
Yeah.
about that, and I posted that online, and that's been the most popular video in a year. It sort of kind of went a bit viral and had like 1 million views of that, and 1,000 comments of people saying this moved me to tears,
Really?
and I'm like, what really? And I realized it was because I was being frank about it. I was sort of inviting
Mm.
people in on the process, and being as authentic. I was being completely authentic in that moment, and not curating things so much. And you realize that in that environment where you can be vulnerable and share that in some shape or form, there's a richness in that, and it's made me really sort of review and think, yeah, you've got to. It's the things we connect with are the very personal ones,
Exactly. Yeah.
when we are ourselves and we reveal the things that are tough for us because everybody else has got those things going on as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was actually that video where I came across you.
Oh, I
That was
see.
the video. Yeah. And then I
Yeah.
thought, hey, this is so interesting. And that made me look at your other work as well. So that was a great video, a great moment that you did that.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it changed my mind, which I really like the notion of. I think that it's one of the
yeah,
hardest things to do is to change our mind about things, and making this sort of conscious decisions to go, I don't feel great. What is there? All right, I'll work at this, and I
mm,
don't feel like doing this or whatever. But you make yourself do it, and
exactly. Yeah,
we think we think we are our thoughts, we think we are our emotions, but we're not. There's a kind of quietness where the awareness that lies behind that. If you
yeah,
can tap into that, and you don't cling on to, or you I like this notion, you observe your thoughts, you observe your emotions,
mm,
um, and when I'm in that environment, I think I connect with that more. It quietens down your thoughts. It's a like a meditation.
yeah,
Um, there's sometimes, when you work on the beach and the tide is coming, and I
oh
can get a
yeah,
little bit stressed there, because you're like, oh, I'm nearly finished. And
yeah,
that wave, have I got 2 minutes or 10 minutes? It's hard to say. You never know
yeah,
that wave is going to come over and
mm,
ruin it. But I say ruin it, but sometimes people are standing by, and when that wave does come over, um, it's never the land artists, but non-armed land artists go, oh no, oh no. And
yeah,
the land artists tend to go, oh, look at that. Isn't that lovely? Because everything's ephemeral at the end of the day. And to
yeah,
what be destroyed, or taken back, or
mm,
just returning to its natural form. There's
exactly.
something lovely about that. And another lesson of not grasping, of impermanence. But I'm not saying I don't sometimes get a bit stressed thinking, oh, I really want this to be finished. I want it to be
Yeah.
finished before that wave comes along. So, you're balancing these things.
But how many lovely lessons you learned through this art as well.
Yes.
That you can see that and that you can acknowledge that um, yeah, I think it's wonderful that it's nature. You're in nature. It costs nothing. It just takes time and patience to do it.
Yes. Well, it's funny, the fact that like when I meet people on the beach or something, it's where I'll meet most people out walking their dogs and things. It's hard not to proselytize and go, yes, it's free, it's healthy, it gets you outside, it gets you,
Yeah,
sunlight, it gets you meeting people, it gets you away from your thoughts have to quieten down in order to focus on this meditative process. So it sort of ticks so many boxes, that are good for us, that I've got to not sort of preach too much about that when I meet with people.
but I think it's
Um,
important, that you say
yes, yeah,
that so
yeah,
people think about it in a different way.
yes. But it's funny because one of the things that people often say to me is, "Oh, you must have a lot of patience," and it always kind of makes me laugh because I think when there's a thing that the thing you really want to be doing, if you have any free time and it's the one thing you really want to do, that doesn't involve patience. If you like reading
Actually, yeah.
books on a towel on a beach in a warm country, which I think we all kind of like a bit of that, and some people really like that. You don't Somebody reading that book, we don't say, "Oh, you've had a lot of patience sitting on that towel
Yeah.
today." And I like, but it's exact reverse for me is like, "Oh, damn, I've only got 4 hours to
Mm.
before I have to get back and do something, pick someone up or whatever." Um, so I'm never feeling like I don't have the patience for these things. There's times you go out and the wind comes along and you're halfway there and it blows something away, or it starts to rain or something, and it can it can press your buttons a bit, but I'll never come away sort of like feeling, well, that was a waste of time,
Oh, yeah.
because you've
Yeah.
still spent that time. It depends what you want or what you see,
Mm.
what the gain of it is.
Mm.
Yeah, so for me, it doesn't take patience to make those things.
Well, it's also that is also a little lesson that if you did something and the wind blew it away, you still did it and you still had that experience, even though it's
Yes.
not visible anymore. And I think many things in life are like that. We dismiss things and say, "Oh, that was a waste of time," but actually, nothing is a waste of time. So,
No.
through this art, you also can show that.
Yes.
that, or experience that little life lesson.
Yes. I don't see, I don't sort of tend to separate things so much these days into good or bad experiences in that way, because I'm like, everything is teaching you something, and usually it's about our attachments to things, and learning to let go. And my mum not being well, she's now down staying with us at the moment. I don't know how long that will be for. It might be for the long term. And everything changes, all
Yeah.
your notions of what you can do and when and all that stuff. But I'm like, this is good. I see it all in terms of try to frame those things in terms of, yeah, there's some challenges, but this is going to teach me this and this and this. I can see that.
Exactly.
And I
Yeah.
welcome that. I kind of welcome it. So, um, and I think for me, that all that time in land art and the time of doing that, um, it's taught me, it's like this, it's like there's no one sort of said the words to me, but you get the words, you get that teaching from the forest, from the beach, from the quiet, and it's a hard thing to put into words, and uh, it's it's only when you're there and when you're getting to share that in particular, at our European Land Art Festival. I had a day in the forest there, and some child came up and jumped on my back when I was making something on the ground. And they were pretending they were a lion, and they were sort of hand coming over my shoulder, trying to help with what I was doing or something. I never saw that child's face, but they were there for about 15 minutes, sort of roaring and being this little lion on my back, um, just playing and just embracing the moment. And they felt like they were safe and okay to do that, because here's a grown up that's playing in the ground.
Yeah.
Love that little relationship thing, that thing that sort of opens up and in that environment. And when else and where else are you going to have those kind of experiences?
Exactly. Yeah.
That sort of invitation to play, and that allowed those kind of moments to arise. And that to me, when I come away, we'd all, the fellow land artists would say, "Oh, what was your best thing today?" And we all come out with the same kind of stories. It's all to do with, a child that's too scared, too nervous, and then half an hour later, they're on their hands and knees and they're laughing and they're making something and they're having a real, moment. That's that's the richness. And sometimes I think um, it's giving people permission. There was a moment last year. My wife's a wild swimmer. She swims in the sea all times of year. And she was with a friend of hers, and she went down to the beach, and I came with them. I think I had the dog with me, and she says, "Right, we'll swim. You just watch the dog, and we'll be out for like 15, 20 minutes." So I began to make sand balls. You just take wet sand and shape it into a perfect sphere. There's a chap, I can't recall his name at the moment, but who specializes in this, um, sand globes. And they're not too tricky. You can learn to make them really quite accurately. It's quite fun. Anyway, I began making these and placing them on top of the pillars and the groins going out to sea, um, down here near Portobello. And this family walked past, and there's a lot of people passing and sort of noticing and nodding or smiling or something. But this family walks past, and this child is so intrigued, and he's sort of pulling at his dad's arm, like, I want to go and see closer. And the man, of course, the dad is going, "Don't bother the man, don't bother
Oh,
the man." And I'm like, and I'm looking over at the kid and going, "Do you want to come and see? Come and see." I love it. I want those interactions. That's the thing you sort of welcome. So this kid came up, and I says, "Do you want to try to do this?" So I was showing him and helping him to make his first sandball, and it's quite tricky to do for a small child. They don't have the hand size and things like this. But I got him to make that, and the parents are sort of standing up there on the promenade, sort of watching like this. And I thought, you're not really beach people, they're not on the sand, they're up, they're
yeah,
up,
yeah.
and I can see they're not maybe that so inclined to go and have that sort of play. And I started doing this with the kid, and I didn't want to stop. I'm like, no, no, let's do this for a while. And before you know it, the parents had sort of found a gap in the wall and come down to sort of join us beside us. And eventually I went back to doing what I was doing, and then I looked over about 2 or 3 minutes later, and the mother, the father, the kid, they were
Oh,
all on their hands
wow.
and knees, all making these sandballs. And you think,
Amazing.
um, that wouldn't have happened otherwise, and like that moment of playing with your kid, it's so important. So
Absolutely.
that's the bit. And I was like, that was my moment for the day. That was my like, whoa, that was great. That's what I
Mm.
want. That's what I want to bring more of that into the world. That would be great.
Absolutely. Oh, I totally agree with you. And it's it's such a basic, such a, it didn't cost them anything, or they didn't have to travel over the world to experience something. It's
Yeah.
there in the sand at the sea. But now that you're talking about the children and the childlike thing about it, this is also something that intrigued me because uh, what I did sometimes, well, I do sometimes when I walk here, and I live in the city, but there's a beautiful park nearby. And if I go for a jog or a run and the weather is nice, I make little hearts with flowers or leaves or berries or something that I find in the park, and I'll make a heart under a tree. But it's just basic. It's not your type of intricate art, but it's just a plain heart under a tree in the soil. Um, and it's also fascinating for me how people, I mean, I do it. I spend the time there, and it's exactly what you're saying. You're totally in your mind. You're totally, away from everything else, thinking of
Yes.
uh, things, and it's sort of isolating. I isolate myself and my mind in that moment of making it or gathering the little things that I want to put in the heart. But it's always for me when I walk away and I see people come to see the heart, that also is satisfying. You know what I mean? It's like
Yes.
it's
Yes.
almost that maybe it's childlike to do that for me, probably, but
Yeah.
for me it's always afterwards the people that come to the heart or that take a photograph of the heart. And then I think, okay, so maybe that intrigued them.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
Um,
and the things that the things it begins, that these little quiet moments that
yeah.
there's a notion of the sort of ripple, the sort of theme that we like to have for the European Land Art Festival, which is ripples of kindness. And
Mm.
you invite people into that moment to make something, to, you're being kind, you're nurturing of people. And I love the notion that that ripples outwards. We don't know that the consequence of our actions, whether they're good or bad, they ripple onwards in ways we
Yeah.
can't imagine. And I love to see that. It's just the days that I've had made things with people, and to see, and I think, oh, what's how is this going to impact their lives going forward? Because I think we've all remembered, those moments, or those teachers and those people at school, or that moment when you've met with someone, but that's had that impact on you. You never know what it is. You look to
Exactly.
any writer or musician or artist and say, what was the moment? What sparked this? And there's nearly
Exactly.
always
Yeah.
like, oh, I had this one teacher who took me aside and said, look,
Mm.
read this, practice this, or look at this, something like that make the difference. And you think, um, yeah, like trying to embody something of that
Yeah.
you might be giving that a little bit of that. And it doesn't have to be that profound. It's just those
Mm.
little quiet moments. I think they are
Yeah.
the ones that are important. Yeah, just to spread that.
Yeah. Well, if you talk about that, I mean, I've interviewed over 700 artists, and
Wow.
yeah, and I can tell you honestly, these are the stories. It's like something
Yes.
like I went to a science exhibition or something, and somebody played one note on a cello, and that sound inspired somebody to go and play the cello, or it's
Yes.
teacher that said something, or it's a parent that did something, or they've been somewhere, and it's little things that you think, how is this possible that this one incident can inspire somebody to become a conductor or a painter or something. And it's true, so
Yes.
it's true, you never know, the things you say, the things you do, and that ripple effect of it.
Yes. Well, for me, mine was um, a friend of mine in Portobello, Kirsty, had posted online on Facebook or something, 2018. She says, "Tomorrow, me and the family are off to the European Land Art Festival, or what was the Rock Stacking Championships at the time."
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, "Oh, I've never heard of that. What is that?"
Mm.
So I sort of looked it up and then ended up going, and just uh, I got there and I saw these land artists on the beach making things. I was behind a rope. We had a rope. There was a rope across the part of the beach, and all the public are there, and the artists on the other side. And it was quite weird because I spent the day feeling a bit annoyed, going, I'm on the wrong side of this rope. These
Really?
are my friends.
Mm.
This is my tribe. These are my people.
Mm.
I'm in the wrong place. And I literally knew it like completely. And I'd never met any of them before. I'd never done this before, which is quite weird because I've always been very sort of artistically inclined. And I loved Andy Goldsworthy, or sort of yeah, someone a lot of people will know from his wonderful land art, which he was doing back in the 80s and maybe even 70s. Well, um, so it was really, that was a moment that that changed it for me. And then I spoke with James Craig Page, the organizer there, and I says, right, I want to get involved with this. And by day two, I was going and taking part in some of
Wow.
the things that they were doing there. And it sort of took off from there. Right from that moment, I was like, no, I need to be back. I need to be involved. And now I go with the same group of people. There's a sort of coterie of us that tend to go to all the different festivals around the world. And most of them are sort of full-time land artists. Not all of them. Some of them are like myself and have a sort of other career as well, and they make time for that. But and there's been festivals in the World Rock Stacking Championships in Texas. There's Tollive, one in the south of Ireland. There's Land Sandstone down in Yorkshire and South Yorkshire, and then ours in Dunbar. So they are wonderful events for having like families and people turn up. And best of all is just when it's people walking along and they had no idea it was on, and they turn the
Oh,
corner.
really?
Some absolutely astounding artworks that have someone has been working on for 5 hours. That's the joy.
Amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. But it's I also am very um fascinated by the fact that you also want to inspire children, because I think that's so important, especially nowadays, that art is being taken out of schools and
Yeah.
children get less and less
Mhm.
time. But now we can do, something like this that's so basic, but taking children back into nature, showing them, making them aware, and to what is possible to do. I think that is so wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, it seems a criminal thing to remove that, because our species is a creative species, and
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
remove that, it's like taking food away from people. It's not, it's if it's fundamentally who we are as people, as creative. It's what's made us so um rich a species. If you took art away from all the things that we do, what on earth would we be doing? Like
Absolutely.
this, we'd miss out on so much. And there's this notion that we've got to focus on GDP and the
Yeah.
finance, and you've all got to be good at your sciences and maths. And you're like, yes, they have their place, but you can't rob what is fundamental to us as a species. And that nurturing that creativity itself, um, it comes out in all other forms. When you're relaxed and
Absolutely.
you're being creative, that has a major impact, and I don't doubt there are studies that support that. It'd be interesting to
A
see
lot of studies
the
support that,
evidence.
yeah.
Yeah. It's just we it's the difference between what governments want and what people want, which
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
increasingly sort of different directions these days.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm so sold on the benefits of art, or certainly has
Absolutely.
been for me. It's
Mm.
it's been everything for my life.
Well, if you look at art, I mean, if you just look at all the different forms of art, how interlinked science and maths are in these art forms. If you look at, say, pottery, or a potter, it needs to understand science to be able to do his art form. I mean, music. It's clear that music has to do with the patterns in maths. So
Yes, yes.
these subjects are all interlinked, and I mean, I think we should be looking at teaching art alongside science and maths and languages in a school.
Yeah, yes. I mean, what I'd love is to be taking more kids out into nature, and I've done some of that with schools. As a school, local school, Tower Bank, I've spent a couple of days on the beach with them, working on land art projects that they were doing, and likewise. With them in the forest for a day. And what a joy to see what these kids make, and just the cooperation. That was the thing that surprised me, how well they all worked together, and how they weren't, I think when they're adults are quite often quite protective and like, no, I'm doing this, and these
Yeah,
kids were so good at working together, and sort of having a sort of holistic approach to it all.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and there's a friend of mine, James Brunt. He's does a phenomenal number of these workshops in schools down in England, and from one day to the next, he's going with almost all the different years in one school, making often a giant mandala, and just seeing how that evolves, even in the middle of winter, or some pretty that you think there's not much natural materials around, but James has got a knack of going, well, look, he sends the kids out and he gets them to say, well, what can you see? Teaching them to look and see in a different way, and say, well, look, there's someone's cut the grass. There's dried grass there we can use. There's twigs. There's sort of mulchy leaves, and before you know it, you've got a design. It might, even though it might be, you know, February or something, and there's not a lot of new
yeah.
growth around. There's not a lot that way, but and that's it's just I hear lovely stories that he tells about that,
Mm.
and that's something I'm hoping to do more workshops with. I've done a few of the workshops around here in Edinburgh, but I'd like to get involved with more, but it's a matter of sort of getting under the radar of these different things, different
Yeah,
local education authorities, that kind of thing. So we'll see
that's
how.
the tricky part.
Yeah, it's a process, but I feel like I'll put the intention out there and just see what
And
see
it's,
what
yeah, it's,
the
yeah.
universe kind of provides
N-
there. That's I've got too much enthusiasm to kind of keep it wrapped up.
Yeah.
It's I'm good intentions to be able to share that
Mm.
more.
No, absolutely. And I think it's also, children, giving them the opportunity, but also learning from them, because I think children have less boundaries than we have in that sense. So
Yes.
it's wonderful, wonderful project. But now, Lawrence, I mean, this is you, apart from you reaching out and doing these educational projects, what still is there for you? What is the wish for you for the future?
Um, to flourish in, and to make this a more sustainable as a means for me to be able to practice this more. And I'm not a financially inclined person. As if I have
Yeah.
to get by. That I'm not really interested in anything more than that. So,
Mm,
so if I can get a sort of model of this that's allowing me in some shape or form to do this more, and currently that is the case because I'm not always busy shooting my photography work.
mm,
When I do, it's quite intense. But because it's quite often intense, short bursts of right. Here's this project we've got to work
mm,
on, and it's full on long days often, away for a week or something like that. And then when I come back from that, right, I'm going to dedicate some time to being in the forest and things. So it's a tricky balance to get that right and to make that time because there's lots of other things pulling you away always.
yeah.
So if I can just keep doing that and keep and able to make that sort of richer and a more concrete part of my life in a way that's involving other people, I'd like that. That's where my sort of intention's at. But it's curious you're asking because I'm not. I think ironically, I'm not really focused on well, what exactly do I want here?
Mm,
And I asked for. I think it's is it Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way? I think there's a book that's like a journal that you write, and it's about nurturing you as an artist and what you want and what you want to do. I
mm.
asked for that for Christmas, so for
Oh,
my
okay.
so I'm hoping if I get that, that's going to be something
Mm,
that will help with just what you've asked
yeah.
there. Because I think I maybe would benefit from getting a kind of clear vision of exactly what I'd want that to be. Because I think when you've got that clearer picture, it makes it easier to get there.
Mm. Yeah, also, I think we have the picture, but sometimes the whole evolution of what we're doing takes us in a direction, that sometimes works out better than we could have ever imagined.
Yes, it's like that when bad things happen, and you're like,
Yeah,
how is it? I've got this sort of notion that when these things we perceive as really positive or really negative happen, it's a bit like a lifeline, and there's this big spike of something, or it's often,
exactly.
oh, I was in a crash, or it goes down like that. And I
Mm,
believe it's not about that moment. It's about the consequence of that. It's how do we react to that? That's just a
mm,
thing that's an event that happens, and if we try not to label it,
yeah.
it doesn't have a value in and of itself. It's just how
Mm,
we are reacting to that, how we are dealing with that. Um,
mm,
yeah, that really has an impact on how I try to see these sort of
mm.
challenges. So sometimes it's someone even losing a job. It's something that can seem pretty awful, but that might facilitate,
Exactly.
freeing
Yeah.
up to do some other things. And, even if it means living basically a lot more frugally, a lifestyle, so it just depends what being open to and not deciding about, what's good, what's bad.
Exactly. I mean, this you hear so often about people through the whole pandemic, how things changed for them, but actually for the positive. So, what was a
Yeah.
negative situation turned
Yeah.
out for some people to really be a big positive, So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
it was for me largely. I mean, we all had that sort of worry, and especially in the beginning of like,
Mm,
whoa, what's happening here? The uncertainty of it all.
yeah.
After that, when I spent so much time sitting, listening to the sound of the trees in the garden. I was very blessed to have a garden. It made me so think. I thought a lot about people who are in, isolated in flats on their own or with a mother with a couple of young children in a tower block or something. I thought, oh my God,
Yeah.
that's just the toughest deal. So I was so much gratitude that
Mm,
for what I'd had there, and I learned to really. I listened a lot to the sound of
mm,
nature, and it really, I don't know, it was like something that you become more attuned to. And if I'm in a forest,
exactly.
that the sound
Yeah.
of the wind in the trees and things like this
Mm.
can sound a bit weird to express
No, but
how
it's
important
it's
that is, but that is, and
yeah.
got a lovely name as well. It's known as Sathurism, the sound of the
Mm.
wind in through
Oh, really?
grasses or trees. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and I love it. I just love it. That's
mm,
like music for me, and
mm,
that's something that happened over the pandemic, because
mm.
I just sat and sort of absorbed that and gained a
Mm.
lot from that.
Well, I spoke to a ballet dancer in that time, and she said that she started noticing bees on her balcony, which she never did before. And I
Yeah,
thought,
there you go.
yeah, isn't it interesting that the moment we had time, we started noticing all these little things
Yeah.
that just passes us by.
Yes. If we don't label something, if we don't project a label on, oh, this is a bad time, and of
Yeah.
course, people have a lot of challenges, we all had some degree or another of that.
Mm.
But, you know, the worrying doesn't tend to
Yeah.
serve us at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And if you remove that, if you can quiet that mind and sort of say, well, what is going on? What are you experiencing? What are you seeing? What is that moment? And for me, I spent at the time, because at that time I was more drawn to stacking rocks or balancing rocks, something
Uh,
that sort of completely shifted away from. I'm not so drawn to now. I'm loving making these things on the ground and the animations and things. Um, uh, but it was so nice to be able to do. It was, because your focus is entirely on that. It just goes, right,
exactly.
we're not going to dwell on something, a thought that's
Mm.
not serving you. You've got to focus on it. You're going to get these rocks to balance here.
Mm.
Um, and that, it focuses in your mind in a sort of quite a weird way. You can
Absolutely.
get almost an altered state from just sitting there staring at those same points for 10 minutes as you're trying to balance that one rock. It would definitely have an impact.
Mm. No, that's true. But Lawrence, this was so great talking to you, and it's wonderful following you and seeing all the lovely artwork that you're doing in nature. You really inspired me.
Thank you, thank you. It's a joy to get the chance to do this. I've only done one other sort of podcast type affair in the
Oh,
past.
really?
It's quite
Mm.
interesting to do this.
No, but it's great because then people can also maybe get inspired as well, and I'm really I hope you get to the work done with the children that you wish to do, and I'll put the wish out as well because I would love
Right?
to,
Yeah.
yeah, to think that more children would be able to do something like that.
Yes. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah. Thank you. That's appreciated. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk with you.
It's a great pleasure, and have a lovely Christmas and a lovely rest of the winter in Scotland.
Okay. And to you too. All right. Take care.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Bye.
Bye.